right. All right, so welcome everyone to the EASSI Solar 101 session. Go ahead and get started. We got a packed agenda. Evie, if you can go to the next slide. We'll go through some quick rounds of introductions, go over solar basics, talk about a local solar manufacturer, solar policy, solar financing, Q&A, and announcements. Next slide. One trivia question, just to build off our orientation and some of the trivia that Don and I shared with you. So true or false, solar panels can produce power without direct sunlight. Please feel free to enter that in the chat or unmute yourselves. Give it 30 seconds and then we'll move forward. All right. All right, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, solar can produce power without direct sunlight, even on a cloudy day. Got a couple folks hopping on to the call, so I'll wait a little bit.
Hi, folks.
All right, hi Pat. Yeah, we're just getting started here. Please mute yourselves. We're gonna go ahead and meet our presenters here. So we have Dan from Solar Neighbors, Leah from MACOG, and Pat from Crossroads Solar. Each one of these folks have their own section, and feel free to provide a little bit more background about yourself and your organization in your own respective section. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. Yeah, so if each organization can unmute themselves, just give a brief introduction to your organization, any members that are also joining you from your organization, and one thing you hope to learn from today's session. Start off with Jeff from the Beacon Resource Center.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Jeff Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the Beacon Resource Center. I am the only member from my organization here. And one thing I hope to learn in today's session is just to get a more clear understanding of solar and how they operate and the functionality and installation, just all around the solar panel education is what I'm looking to learn.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. How about Carol from Holy Cross Parish and School?
Carol Thon, Holy Cross Parish and School. I'm here by myself today, and like Jeff, I'm looking for more of an overview on the information. We're very interested in pursuing solar options, and even more so after recapping those utility bills for our intake. So happy to be here and eager to learn.
All right, thank you, Carol. Tommy from Paramount Schools of Excellence.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tommy Reddix, Paramount Schools of Excellence. I'm the CEO at Paramount. We're hubbed out of Indianapolis, but moving up to South Bend and working on opening up a school there. I'm here alone today and excited to learn more. So thanks so much.
Aaron from the South Bend Civic Theater.
Hello, I am stepping out of another meeting, so I am attending in a hallway, but I am the executive director at South Bend Civic Theater. We are just looking at all kinds of energy efficiencies. It's been a hard 2 years, and so any way we can save money, we're looking to. We're actually installing a new chiller, and so there's some energy efficiency options with that. So exploring solar kind of on the long-term end, I know that there's some opportunities for us with our building on Main Street here in South Bend. So I'm anxious to hear about the opportunities that will be available to us. Thank you for having this.
All right, great, thank you, Aaron. If you can go to the next slide. All right, well, so we'll get into the solar basics. I'm going to hand it off to Dan from Solar United Neighbors.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you all. Can you hear me okay? All right, wonderful. So Solar United Neighbors is a national nonprofit, and we work to help people go solar, come together, and fight for their energy rights. And so part of what I'm going to do this morning is focus on the basics of solar. But just as a background, one of the ways that we help people go solar is through our solar co-ops, which are group buy opportunities. We recently, well, we just wrapped up a co-op registration period in the South Bend, Elkhart, Goshen area, and a couple of the organizations that are part of this program are in the co-op, so we're excited to see them there. And so yeah, I'm glad to be here this morning. So next slide, please. We get a lot of questions. Does Indiana have enough solar for sun and for enough sun for solar? And we certainly do. If you look at that solar intensity map, there's a lot of solar resources in the southwest part of the U.S., but here in Indiana, we still have more solar resources than Germany, which is one of the leaders in the world in solar. So we have all that sun to grow corn and soybeans. We might as well grow a little electricity with it too. So next slide, please. And solar is indeed growing. 2011, scatterings of solar around the state. 2017, when an anti-solar bill was passed at the state legislature, putting some deadlines on installation of solar, we saw it grow. And a successful co-op that Solarize Indiana ran here in the South Bend, Elkhart, Goshen area. And then 2021 just exploded in Indiana. In fact, Indiana was the it will be the fourth fastest growing state for solar if you take in both rooftop and utility scale solar in the country. So we are growing. Next slide, please. So how do solar panels work? A co-presenter of mine once said they're magic, but I always like that answer. But really, it's just sunlight hitting silicon wafers that are in the solar panels. It excites the electricity and it excites the electrons, which produces electricity. So we're basically converting with these solar photovoltaic cells, converting solar energy to electricity. Next panel, last slide, please. This is a quick diagram of how a solar system will work on your building. You'll have the solar array, the various sets of panels on the roof. Sunlight hits that, produces electricity, which is direct current or DC electricity, sends it to the solar inverter, which is on somewhere located on your building, either outside or inside. And that inverter will convert that DC electricity to AC or alternating current electricity, which is the kind of electricity your building will use. It'll send that electricity to the panel where it's used up by lights and computers and whatever else you have operating in your building. What your building doesn't use at that particular moment will be sent through the utility meter and out into the grid will be used by your neighbors. Next slide, please. So some important terminology, kilowatts versus kilowatt hours. Kilowatts is the capacity or the power capacity of a system, and that's measured in kilowatts, a kilowatt being 1,000 watts. If you look at that array of panels on the bottom of the slide there, you'll see 12 350 watt panels. You take that 12 times 350 watts, you get 4,200 watts or a 4.2 kilowatt size array. Kilowatt hours is the electricity that's produced by those panels and what's used in your building. So when you get your electric bill at the end of the month, it'll be in kilowatt hours. And the way to think about the two things is kind of like a car with an engine has a certain amount of horsepower, whether it's sitting still or whether it's going down the road, that's its power capacity. And that's what kilowatts are for a system. But the miles per hour, the energy that's produced, the work that's being done, that's in a sense for electricity, the kilowatt hours. And so that 6 to 7 kilowatt average size is more for residential. With commercial or nonprofit buildings, it's going to vary widely depending on your building and your usage and how much of that of your electricity you want to cover based on your budget. Next slide, please. So panels are going to consist of certain layers or certain elements that are put together. You have the solar cells, those silicon wafers that are stitched together into a panel at the heart of the panel. Then it'll be having a capsule in the front and the back. The front will have a thick tempered glass, very protective, very strong, kind of like you think about the glass on your car. It's very, very tough. The back of that has a back sheet, and on the back of that is a junction box where the panel hooks into the electrical system and feeds the inverter, and it's all held together by a frame. And when you have a number of those panels stitched together, that's how you get a solar array. Next slide, please. Lots of different ways to put the panels on your roof of your building. Racking systems are, depending on the type of roof that you have, there's a racking system that'll fit that. This is on a traditional slanted asphalt shingled roof where the racks are attached directly to the roof through nails, and those are sealed so that they don't leak. Next slide, please. But depending on the type of roof you have, there's all different kinds of racking systems. For example, in the bottom left-hand side, you'll see clamps onto a metal roof. And if you have a flat roof on your building, there's ways to put that on there and even tilt the panels to catch the rays. Next slide, please. So what kind of roof is good for solar? Well, certainly a south-facing roof or a south-facing orientation for your panels on your roof is the best. You're going to get the most solar resources from that. But at our latitude and the efficiency of the panels now, east and west-facing panels work well as also. So those are just fine. What won't work is a north-facing array on a north-facing roof. We just don't get enough sun at this latitude to make that worth it. You want little or no shading, of course, on the panels, and you want enough space to mount the panels on your roof. 200 square feet is typically the minimum size for an array on your roof. Now, that 200 square feet doesn't have to be in a single rectangle or single square. It can be at different spots on your roof, but usually 200 square feet is kind of a minimum size. And what this slide doesn't show is the condition of your roof. We always recommend that if your roof needs to be replaced within 10 years or less, that it's good to get your roof replaced first before you put the panels on there. Having a roof in poor condition or that needs to be replaced soon isn't necessarily going to hurt the production of the panels. It's just that you have to pay to get them taken off, have the roof replaced, and then pay to have them put back on. Some folks for residential decide, hey, I'm going to take my roof off in 7 years. I'm still going to put the panels on there and get 7 years worth of production. It just depends on your economics and what you want to accomplish. But we tend to recommend 10 years or less, get your roof replaced first. Next slide, please. So your inverters then. Inverters are the piece of equipment that converts DC electricity to AC electricity. And there's a couple different kinds of inverters. There's a string inverter. A string inverter gathers all the electricity from all the panels into a single inverter and converts that to AC electricity. Whereas a microinverter is a single inverter on the back of each of the panels. So if you have 12 panels, you'll have 12 microinverters. Now, each of them have pros and cons. A string inverter, if one panel diminishes its electricity production, then the electrical production of all the panels is reduced a little bit. So that's a downside to that. Whereas with a microinverter, if a cloud happens to be going by, for example, and the electricity production in that panel goes down, it's not going to affect the production of the other panels. However, with 12 microinverters, you have more expense versus one string inverter. So it just sort of depends on your situation. Now, there are DC optimizers that will lessen the impact of that reduction in electricity with the string inverter. So those are often installed with the DC optimizer. So again, you want to talk to your installer and find out which inverter makes the most sense for your setup. You may not have any tall buildings around you or any trees blocking your panels, and so a string inverter might just work just fine. It just depends on your situation. Next slide, please. And then the inverter will send that electricity into your panel for your building. Most panels are not going to need an upgrade in order to hook the system into that. It's a simple connection. Every once in a while, there will be a panel, an older panel that might need that, and your installer can help with that. But most panels, that's not necessary. Next slide, please. Now, one of the other things that an inverter does is when the electricity goes down on the grid, because your building is going to be hooked into the grid for those times when your panels aren't producing electricity, like say at night. When the grid goes down, the second job that the inverter has is to shut your panels down. And the reason for that is a safety mechanism. If we have utility workers out on the lines trying to fix the lines to get the grid back up, we don't want to send any unexpected electricity out there that might injure them. So the inverter's job is to shut that down. However, if you need backup power at those times, you might want to consider a battery or storage on your building. If you have frequent utility outages, if you have critical loads like a pump or medical equipment, or if you just want to be ready in a disaster, a battery for backup power makes sense for you. What we don't recommend is, as much as the cost of batteries has come down, they aren't quite cheap enough where you can store up energy, then send it out to the grid, sell it back to the utility, and make some money. They just don't make economic sense at this point. But if you need backup power, they're a great way to go. Next slide, please. If you want to find out more information about battery storage, this says battery storage for homeowners, but a lot of those principles are going to be the same for a nonprofit building. You can go to our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/storage. And in fact, I encourage you to go to that website. There's a ton of information on there about solar, and put something in the search bar and you can find out all kinds of great information. Next slide, please. So some frequently asked questions. How long do systems last? Well, the literal answer to that is a long time. I was at a farmer's market last summer where somebody came up and asked me if I knew of a company that could repair their solar panels. And I said, oh, how long have you had them? And said, oh, since the 1970s. So they last a long time. But when people ask that question, oftentimes they're asking about warranties. And so there's 3 different kinds of warranties that'll come with your panels. First one is a power production warranty. It's a 25-year, sometimes 30, but most often 25-year warranty from the manufacturer for producing electricity at a certain capacity. Generally, at the end of 25 years, your panels are guaranteed to produce somewhere in their 80 to 90% of the electricity that they produced in year 1, which I think is pretty good. A lot of equipment doesn't last that long for 25 years. I think it's a pretty good warranty. The second thing is on the product warranty itself for the panels, for defects resulting from improper manufacturing. Those are going to be 10 years on the panels. Generally, I've seen some that are longer. It just depends on the kind of panels you get. I've seen some as long as 25 years. Inverter, depending on the kind of inverter you get, it's going to be anywhere from 10 to 25 years. The string inverters tend to be around 10 to 13 years. Microinverters and DC optimizers are around 25 years. And then the third kind of warranty you'll get is labor from the installation company. That'll be anywhere from 2 to 10 years. I've seen some warranties longer than that. There's one company I know of that provides a lifetime warranty on labor, the work that they did on their panel. So again, it depends on the installer that you go with. And for some people, that's a deciding factor for them as to which company they pick. And you just want to be sure that you're aware of what all the warranties are and what they mean and who to contact before you sign your contract. Property insurance, generally speaking, your panels will not increase your property insurance on your building. You want to be sure and tell your insurance company that you have them on there in case something should happen so you can replace the panels through your insurance. The one place that they might increase your property insurance is, all of us have our buildings, our homes, whatever it might be, insured up to a certain level, whether it's $250,000, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it might be. The value of the panels when added to the replacement value of your building, generally speaking, isn't going to push you into the next category of insurance. Every once in a great while, it will. So you want to talk to your insurance company, make sure they're aware of the panels, but generally speaking, it will not increase your property insurance. And then finally, with maintenance, very little maintenance with these panels. They're pretty maintenance free. Some people ask, when it snows, do I need to get the snow off the panels? Because panels generally are mounted on the roof, depending on your building. If you've got a flat roof and a place to walk up there, yeah, you could take a specially designed implement that won't scratch the panels to kind of pull the snow off. But generally speaking, we don't recommend that. You're not going to lose a whole lot of production in a day or two in the wintertime on short days when those panels are covered by snow and the sun's going to melt those pretty quickly. So these are pretty maintenance free. If you happen to live in an industrial area where a lot of soot and dust gets settled on the panels, you might want to take a hose once a year and just hose them off with water, no soap, because again, you don't want to scratch the panels. So there we go. I hope that I get in the time. Again, I'm Dan Robinson with Solar United Neighbors of Indiana, and that's our email address if you ever want to get in touch with me. And I see Donna has a question, but I don't know. It's up to Alex whether we're handling questions now or at the end. I'm okay.
Yeah, what do you think, Alex?
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question that many of our organizations here have several electrical panels. They have large buildings that have been added to and aggregated over time, and so they end up with several different electrical panels. How do you make that determination about, does it all go to one? Do it, how do you deal with that?
Well, it depends on how your panels are set up. There's like two different ways that question can be asked. One is just the installation of that, and that'll be up to your installer as to what makes the most sense about which panels to plug into. Some of those may be sub panels to your main panel, so it's just a matter of what makes sense in terms of the electricity setup. The other way to answer that question is, are the panels tied to each other to a single meter for your building, or are they separate meters? If they're separate meters, then it depends on if it's just a single meter, then you're just going to have one set of panels with 1 meter and 1 bill. If it's separate meters, then I think, don't hold me to this, but I think you can install different panels and different setups for different meters because you're receiving multiple bills. Does that answer your question? Leah may have a better sense of that than I do, and if I got that wrong, I'll let her.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, let's go on to the next section here. We'll talk about our local solar manufacturer, Crossroads Solar. So Pat, you're up next.
I'm on. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Dan did a good job of describing the process of generating power from the sun. I am a solar panel manufacturer. We manufacture solar panels in South Bend. We do it with a unique social mission that all of our employees come out of the federal and state prison system. So they're men and women integrating back from prison into society. They most often have a very difficult time finding meaningful employment in our world, you might think of it. And so we provide them a good wage with benefits, retirement match. We try and get them back on the road to full integration. We are a for-profit company, but with the primary mission being a social mission. I left my job at Notre Dame to start Crossroads. And I look out at a window here, and there's probably a dozen men and women out there working, all of whom spent between years and decades in prison. And it's just a buzz. They're all working. One of them was, we were unloading a semi yesterday, and he said, I applied to FedEx and they wouldn't hire me. I said, why wouldn't they hire you? He says, because my felony. Okay. So they're all doing great. We make panels. From Dan's presentation, he showed you pictures of what they do. We start with a solar cell like this, and we use automated equipment. Some of it you can see in the pictures to string these together into the solar strings that you see in a solar panel. That's completely automated. We use, in Dan's presentation, there was some, what he called EVA, which we call EVA, just some laminate material that we sandwich the solar strings together. We do that in a manual process. I mean, our objective is to get people working. You could automate it. We choose not to. In each case, we use really the highest quality inputs that we can, because we can't compete with the lowest quality outputs. So we try and build panels that are competitive with all the big name folks. We just do it with a mixture of automated and manual processes. So you buy a solar panel from Crossroads, and you get all the benefits that Dan described. You get solar energy from the sun, electric bills that diminish or are eliminated in this process. You also get a society that's a little more humane. And whether it's from a church or house of worship perspective, which to my mind are all built on the notion of forgiveness and reconciliation. That's the hallmark of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. And that's the hallmark of Crossroads. So you get a panel that's built with inputs that are consistent with the social values that all of you would be subscribing to implicitly because you're somehow tied in the nonprofit world. And you get a panel that's competitive in quality with all the name brand ones that are out there. They're bigger name brands, but they're not necessarily a better panel. We are price point competitive. We are not the cheapest panel on the market. We are price point competitive with the bigger brand named companies, but not with the Asian imports. You know, we as we like to say, we build panels, solar panels, and people at the same time. And you're welcome to come visit the plant. Here's a couple folks that you know are in the plants working. Those are our panels on an array. You know, we're a humble, smallish solar panel manufacturer who is trying to demonstrate that you can change the way you think about the world and change the way you think about people and change the way we interact with our environments by getting off the carbon footprint. So I think that's good enough for me.
All right, thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat?
Jeff, were you talking? You're muted.
I'm telling my dog to relax.
All right, well, I think we can go on to the next section, solar policy, and I think that's Leah. So Leah, you can share your screen.
Great. Are you able to see it in presentation mode?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. All right, I'll just jump right in because I have a lot to cover. Let's see. Seems there's a little delay in me changing the slides, I think. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start with a little deeper dive into when you use energy and when solar produces energy, so you have a better understanding of why something called net metering matters. Because net metering is a policy that means it doesn't matter when you use or produce energy because the grid operates essentially as like a free battery. So we'll go over a phase out timeline because that's ending this year, and then talk about what replaces that and the different methods that might be applied. We have some uncertainty on how that will be done. And there's also uncertainty for you if you'll be installing your solar before or after the deadline. So this is all very important to be aware of at this time. And then I won't be covering another incentive, which is the federal tax credit. That's currently at 26% for businesses and homeowners. But if you're a nonprofit or you don't otherwise pay taxes, you are not eligible for that credit. So we won't go into detail on that. So first, looking a little bit more at daily solar energy production, this blue curve here shows a typical sunny day, but often you'll have days where there's clouds or really rainy day where you'll produce less. So it varies by season, it varies by weather, but that doesn't mean it's unreliable. That doesn't mean it's unpredictable because over a year, generally, on average, we receive about 1,300 kilowatt hours for every kilowatt of solar that you have. So from year to year, it'll be generally consistent despite daily variation. However, your solar hours shown in this yellow curve, that's your solar production between like 9 and 4, depending on the season. That doesn't necessarily match your consumption profile, which shown in blue is sort of a typical person that works 9 to 5. They get ready in the morning and then they come back in the evening. And so net metering means that this mismatch doesn't matter. Every amount of electricity you produce, you're getting full credit for. But after net metering, it will matter potentially when you're using electricity during the day. So just again, typical solar production over the month to month over the year. And here's sort of a classic picture of an ideal production, but you may have an extremely sunny March where it actually doesn't rain, and then you may have a really, really rainy May. This happened 2 years ago. These are real world examples. And then here I've reduced production in the fall because this is my house actually. I have a large tree and a neighbor next to me that as the sun angle gets low in the sky in the fall, I start to get shading on my panels, so it's less than what like is typical or ideal. So you may have certain site characteristics that may make your monthly production look slightly different than the ideal shown on the left. Here's just an example from Kern Road Mennonite Church. They've had solar since 2015, and you can see generally consistent, varies month to month, but over each year, it's generally about the same amount of electricity produced. So let's compare the two, your usage and monthly production of the solar array on the right. This first one, really high usage in the summer, like from air conditioning, lower usage in the winter, perhaps you have natural gas heating. And this actually would match fairly well in a post-net metering world, matching solar production and your consumption. Here's an example where it's about the same month to month. Here's an example that's really not great for post-net metering because you have really high electricity usage in the winter. You have very, very low electricity usage in the summer, and that's really when most of your solar energy is being produced. So let's look at what happens to those bills when you go from no solar to solar. So shown on the bottom, you'll notice that electricity use is wiped out several months out of the year, and there's zero billable usage. But in the shoulders here, you don't get those wiped out. They're decreased a little bit, but not significantly so. So it's just very important to keep in mind that the temporal production of electricity and your usage patterns, which are unique to you as an organization and your facilities, it does matter if you're considering solar after net metering goes away. So what is net metering? That's where all the electricity that is excess, that's sent out onto the grid to be used by your neighbors, it's fully credited at retail value when it's sent to the grid. And that export during the day, it covers your electricity that's used at night. It covers credits that are excess from month to month. From July, August, September, they'll be used in December, January, February. And so it's essentially the grid acting as a free battery so that everything has the same value, and the time that you use or produce something just isn't relevant to you and your behavior and your decisions. So let's first look at what the rates are before we look at some billing examples so you have a better understanding of what your bill might look like. On the left is the residential rates, but let's look at the general service tariff for Indiana Michigan Power. There are demand charges if you use more than 10 kW. Those are not shown on the bill, so you have to understand how to calculate those yourself. But if you have a really small organization, you may not actually have a demand charge. And then there's a declining block rate. So the first 4,500 has a higher rate. And after that, it's like tax brackets. It's a lower rate applied. So probably a lot of you will just be looking at this first rate here. And that matters when you're trying to calculate a payback period. So you'll look for your tariff code on your current bills to understand which tariff that you are in here and how to understand your rates. So this slide's a little more complex, but I think it's important to understand how things show up on the bill because on a daily basis I get, especially recently as net metering's ending and people are concerned about, people think that the end of net metering means their net metering's ending, and it's not, and I'll go over that later. But for new projects, after the deadline, you won't get net metering. But if you have net metering, here's how it works. You produce 800 kilowatt hours. 420 of those are exported onto the grid because the very moment that it's produced, you're at work, your house isn't using that much electricity or your office. So that's exported. But at a later time, you actually use 375 kilowatt hours during that month. And so if you look over here at the net, on net, you sent out 45 kilowatt hours more than you used from the grid. So your billable usage is zero. And you will still pay that monthly fixed charge. This is my bill. So it shows my monthly service charge, which is residential rate. you'll still pay that. You'll pay the sales tax. So your bill's not literally zero, but you have no billable usage. And it's important to understand that this delivered and received is from the perspective of your utility. So your utility delivered to you this much and then received from you this much. But sometimes people will be confused. What happened to my 800 kilowatt hours? Is the utility wrong? I only see 420 on my bill. That's because they literally can't see, like their meter's here. They literally can't see. This is called behind the meter. They can't see your behind the meter usage, where it's going directly to your light bulbs from your service panel. That's 380 kilowatt hours. So you really have to look at your inverter and your dashboard to understand your total production, and then you'll only see the part that's exported on your utilities bill. So important to understand how that works. And those credits then, the 45, you have no billable usage, but those get banked and applied to a future month. Okay, all right. So let's look at another example where you do have some billable usage. So in this example here, the utility delivered to us more than they received from us. So there were actually 86 kilowatt hours of net usage, but they don't bill us for that full amount because our bank balance from previous months was actually 27 kilowatt hours that we had banked. And this is not following the previous example, but you see in August, it showed a billable usage of 0, but really that was a credit of 27. And then that decreased the 86 down to 59. And then you're only billed for that remaining amount there. But because you have billable usage, which is shown under current billing, there are other riders then that apply. Some are negative, but most are positive. And those riders, when you're calculating your payback period, you're probably just looking at the electricity rate, and that's a good approximation. But just understand that any electricity that you use has additional associated riders that generally the positive amount you owe outweighs like a negative fuel adjustment there. So just details there, but good to understand. Okay, something very important to understand that Indiana Michigan Power does not do is they do not show you your bank balance. It's as if your bank statements in the mail have your transactions, but not your ending balance. That's obviously a problem, but you can complain to the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission if you don't like that. Feel free. The remedy right now is to contact customer service. But what happens is if they make mistakes on the bill, it's very hard to identify that, and you have to keep your own spreadsheet. And it would be best if they simply put your bank balance on your bill instead of requiring you to contact them to make sure everything is accurate. Oh, the phase out of net metering. The most important thing to understand is we're like right here. We're about to drop off a cliff, June 30, 2022. So I didn't get into this earlier, but I work for MACOG, but I also MACOG also ran Solarize initiatives dating back to 2017, and then we started working with Sun here in 2021. But we've been working to help people go solar since 2017 as this drop off happened from 30 years of net metering to 15, and then it's been a slow phase out, and it'll drop from 10 years of net metering to 0. So this is another critical cliff we're approaching. So very important to understand this deadline. What is the deadline? 2 parts. Your interconnection application must have been received by the utility, and then they must confirm to you that your application was complete. And you must be installed. So installed is defined by the Regulatory Commission as set up and ready to operate, panels installed, inverters installed, and then the caveat is except for utility inspections, it doesn't say the building department inspections, utility inspections and changing your meter to the net meter. That's Indiana Michigan Power for all customers. That should be all of you. If you talk to someone in Goshen and they say, hey, something different, they actually already ended net metering early. Oh, there's a typo that should say commercial and industrial. I'll make sure to change that in the slides. Net metering ended early for commercial and industrial, but for residential, they're giving people a whole year after they submit their application to install. And so they're on just a completely different timeline than what you're on, which is install on or before June 30th, which is the same as saying by July 1st. But when do you have to submit your interconnection application? If you go to Indiana Michigan Power's website, it has more information. It links to a general administrative order that the Regulatory Commission put out that sets forth a timeline that's in state statute on the interconnection process. And other utilities, Duke and AES Indiana, they have said submit by the middle of April. That's their recommendation, to have your interconnection application ready to go and not have any issues with it not being complete because the name didn't match what was on your bill, or other issues, or you had the wrong meter number. So that means potentially at the earliest signing a contract in time for an installer to submit your application by mid-April as well. So INM has not provided a recommendation, and they're only requiring that they have confirmation that your application's complete. That's what they've said in the email. That's not what they've said on their website. So I would just keep deferring to what is on that link there. If they update and they further clarify the requirements, it'll be right there. So very important to keep checking that. So what happens after net metering? It's called the EDG tariff, which stands for Excess Distributed Generation. That's what all new systems will enroll in after July 1 for Indiana Michigan Power. The rate is set in state law as the utility's wholesale rate plus 25%. So a small number, and adding 25% to that's still a small number. But INM's proposed tariff is just about 2.5 cents. That's nearly 80% less than the residential rate. That's about 3/4 devaluation for general service commercial customers. These are the declining block rates. So it is a significant impact, but to what? We know what the rate might be, but how is that applied? And that's very important. It's very important if it's only applied to monthly excess, you can see only this is going to be devalued by 3/4 of the production. But if they're devaluing everything instantaneously, that means even within this period, everything that does not overlap your usage will also be devalued. That's called instantaneous method. This is called monthly netting method. So let's go over that a little more. So the low EDG rate in instantaneous is applied to all export. Residential, you don't know. There's no way you know how much that you would export because you don't have that level of data. You don't have 15-minute interval data to understand how much you are using at any given point to match that over a typical solar profile. Commercial, it really varies. If you're a church and you're only operating really on Sunday and you have light usage during the week, you're going to export a tremendous amount. But if you're a church with a daycare that operates and has hours throughout the week, throughout the year, you're actually in much better shape to have much less export. So it all depends on your unique load profile and usage. And you need to understand the percentage of export in order to project your payback period. But it's important to understand that under instantaneous, your payback period could double or more if you were in some of these worst case export levels. There are other strategies you can use to reduce export, such as batteries and some things I'll get into later. But let's first recap monthly excess. So monthly excess, again, the low EDG rate is only applied if you're banking kilowatt hours from month to month, which is, this line represents your usage for someone who's using the same amount every month. And this is their monthly excess, which they're trying to use to credit to when they are producing less. It's only applied to kilowatt hours when they receive less from you than what they, more from you than what they supply to you. If your system's small enough, you actually will have no monthly excess. And so there could be absolutely no impact to you from the end of net metering if monthly excess is the method that will be instituted. So that's potentially good news, but we just don't know which rate it will be. And then also, it doesn't matter when you use electricity during the day. It just doesn't matter. It just matters over the course of a month whether you produce more than you use. So that means some strategies like batteries, they're not really needed under this monthly excess model as well. So you don't want to invest $10,000, $20,000 extra dollars in something when that's not addressing your excess. But what you can do is reduce your monthly excess by increasing your on-peak usage over the course of the entire month. So that could be electrifying an appliance that is natural gas to electricity and then either scheduling it or using it during the day when your solar panels are active. That's what you can do to decrease the impact of EDG rates to monthly excess method. There we go. Or get electric vehicles and charge them during the day. There you go. So let's just look at this visually quickly. This yellow is monthly excess. The green stripe is what you first export onto the grid and then later you use it. And then solid green is what you're using behind the meter. So under instantaneous, here's an example where 80% of your solar power is first exported before you use it, or it's being sent as a credit to the next month. So under this example, for every $10 of value under net metering, it's less than 4. And if monthly excess was used in this method, only a quarter of your production's actually monthly excess. So you're maybe still around $8 of value. And so that's a big difference between the two. Let's look at an example. This is, again, my solar system personally, but it only covers about half my usage over the entire year. So there's no yellow. I literally do not have monthly excess. And so when net metering ends, like it doesn't impact me. There's no financial impact under monthly excess. But if there's the instantaneous method, it devalues my system production by about 60% because about 60% of my power is exported. So this matters. Unfortunately, here's where we stand, and it's very important to be transparent about this. Legally, there's a case that's at the Supreme Court right now. A number of entities filed suit against one utility they were the first to get their EDG tariff approved, and they used the instantaneous method. And the Court of Appeals overturned that. They said that's unlawful to apply the EDG rate to all instantaneous export. This week, the IURC and the utilities have appealed to have that transferred to the Supreme Court. We don't know if the Supreme Court yet will accept that or what the outcome will be of that case, but it's at least at play. Prior to that lawsuit, it was assumed that instantaneous would just be the law of the land. So there is some window of opportunity that monthly excess could happen, especially in light of the Court of Appeals ruling that instantaneous was unlawful. So the next piece of uncertainty is that the EDG tariffs, which are approved or pending, like for Indiana, Michigan Power, after that legal case, those will need to be settled as to what method will be applied. And then there's some legislative uncertainty that even if the Supreme Court sides with the monthly excess method in spring 2023, legislators at the State House could simply change the law and very clearly say, now it must be instantaneous. That would be unfortunate, especially since people they have investment-backed expectations. What they're deciding now is based on current law and what's lawful now. So I really hope that doesn't come to that because that would be pretty problematic as well. But what are some strategies? Let's just assume instantaneous will happen. That's worst case scenario. You would make sure to get a smart inverter to manage your energy use because it matters during the day, whether you're exporting or using it behind the meter. You would look at batteries. Batteries are required to maintain power during an outage, but they're an important strategy under the EDG method of instantaneous method. There are different types. They have different maintenance needs. There's no typical cost. It's really what you want to run for how long. And this is an example of former California governor's private off-grid residence. No one here is going to do off-grid. It doesn't make sense to cover your needs in the winter. But this is just an example of what a battery setup could look like with a lot of batteries. But maybe all you need is 1 or 2 batteries to manage your day-to-day export. But it's important to understand that daily export can be managed by batteries, but you can't really manage your month-to-month export. You can't save up energy from July and use it in December from batteries. So there are other strategies that you need to do to increase your overall usage of electricity during that month when solar production is high. So like I said, electric vehicles charging during the day. There are actually inverters with integrated EV charging, or you could do so separately. You can have smart and timed appliances. As things need to be swapped out, you make a plan to swap them out and buy something that can be scheduled to operate during the day or is smart and can interact with your smart inverter. Or you look at electrifying natural gas usage. So switching your water heater to an efficient heat pump, which can be timed to run during the day. natural gas furnaces and boilers to electric heat pump. Again, managing when those are operating, stoves, ovens, clothing dryers. There are a lot of things there are a lot of options out there. And I linked just a good article from last year just explaining kind of the current state of batteries from Solar Power World Online, and I'll send out some additional resources. So I think that's a hopefully not more confusing, but it's just really important to understand the current uncertainty, but as well as what strategies you can use to overcome the impact of this lower rate being applied to excess electricity sent to the grid. So with that, that's just the federal tax credit, but I won't get into that. Questions? I know that was a lot.
Yeah, I have a question, and it was
Sure.
a lot. Will there be organizational kind of consultation to kind of make the best decision for our individual organizations? Because the net metering on the surface seems like the better of the two options, but the timing is very, very short, and will lead time of solar panels and all these other things impact getting panels installed by June 30th? So yeah, to look at the other option, we'll just some consultation even beforehand in the next several weeks, be able to sit down based on the information we provided with all our last 2 years of electrical consumption and all that, just to make a really good educated decision for our organizations.
Yeah, I'll let Evie chime in after me, but I would just say that installers have known about this for 5 years, so they've been preparing as much as they can with the supply chain issues to have solar panels in stock. So it probably comes down more to the issue of that individual installer's amount of business and just the labor and the amount of work that they can do between now and July 1st. So it really comes down to talking to individual installers and asking, when can we expect to get installed? And some of them are having cutoff dates where they're not comfortable guaranteeing July 1st after such and such a date of a contract being signed. So you just have to ask them, what's your guarantee, or like, what's your cutoff? They may let you sign a contract after a certain date, but they may say, like, we really can't absolutely guarantee this will be done by July 1. Evie?
Yeah, I'll chime in. And yes, Jeff, we are happy to sit down as soon as next week too, because we understand the timing is pretty quick. And that's also why we definitely wanted to have this session, to make sure you're aware of those timing restrictions, what it might mean. So happy to have some one-on-one organizational consultations to talk about if it's right to move quickly or what that means.
Okay. And a follow-up to that, and Donna, maybe this is a question for you. Will our final report tell us how much solar equipment we need?
It will not say how much you need. It will say how big an area you have that you could potentially put panels in. But it's really varies, and I think is Juan on here from La Casa? It really, really varies depending on individual installation, and we just don't have the ability to go that deeply into scope. So coordinating with an installer, with someone who can give you a quote and give you a realistic insight into whether it's something you can do before July 1 is really going to be more important. Talking to an installer about it.
Okay, but the amount of an array, is that determined on what your average consumption has been, or how was that determined? How many panels you need?
Yes. So all of the information we're putting into this report will be what an installer could then look at quickly and say, this is how much you need. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And again, remember, we did that sort of green light, like you have in the memo, like this is you, Jeff in particular, are an excellent candidate for it. You have space, you have a new roof, which means throwing those panels up on top of that brand new roof would be easy. And yeah. So yeah, in your case, I would say, go ahead and start calling some installers to see. Evie, do you want to codify that with anything put an encomium that anything the city might need to say about that?
Yeah, no, I'd say. Go ahead, Dan.
If I could just jump in real quick. The one thing I would say is, from a generic standpoint, that it still makes sense to install panels financially with net metering, especially if you're producing less than 100% of your electricity. So if your design says you can produce 100% of your electricity with this many panels, but your budget says, oh, we can only put a portion of this, then you can do that. I think it still make financial sense. The second thing is, if you only have financial sense of installing less panels than than you need for 100% of your electricity, but you think you might have the financial wherewithal to do it down the road, you can install an inverter that is matched to the size that you'll eventually need to cover 100% of your electricity, because that's what determines your eligibility for net metering. So some people are putting in their complete need for a size of an inverter for, like, say, an 8 kilowatt system, because that covers 100% of their needs, but they're only installing 4 kilowatts of panels now and then installing more later. So a lot of it depends on your budget.
Okay.
So can I just put one thing on the table when we're talking about the financial implications of doing this? There's also a great environmental reason to do it that transcends the dollar and cents version of it. So I know budgets are tight for all nonprofits and budgets are tight for me, but doing the right thing sometimes is also worth a lot of money. That's all.
All right, thank you. Leah has also put in the chat a interest form for post net metering webinars and updates. I'll share that with everyone post this session. I know we're running a little bit on time, so I just want to alert folks about that, because I believe our session was from 10 to 11. I will continue through the rest of the slides here, so if you do have to leave, please know that we are recording the session, and in the update I'll share with you, I'll share a recording, and you'll be able to see the remainder of those slides if you're not able to attend all the way through the remainder of the session. Pat, I think, do you still have your hand up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, cool. So, like, how does EASSI and solar work together? So just kind of like those steps, like for the EASSI program. So through the energy assessment, it'll help prioritize and decide on what projects you want to choose, and if you're a good candidate for solar, then you look into soliciting quotes. Then go ahead. Next step, yeah, select contractors. And then from contractors, decide on financing. And of course, through any step of this process, feel free to contact the city, and we'll assist in any of those steps. Next slide. So just kind of going through these steps. So the assessment component. So Donna has shared with you a memo that has given a bit of a background on the condition of your building and the solar potential. So I just took out some excerpts from some examples of some of the memos that she put together. So the table format, indicates that this particular building is a good candidate for solar, that the roof is in need of replacement. So it might be a good idea as you replace that roof to consider solar panels and take advantage of the lifetime of that roof, as long as with the solar system that you would potentially put in place. And then at the lower left-hand part of the screen here is another thing that Donna has shared as part of that memo, an aerial view, as well as whether your building is a good candidate for solar, and the possible locations and the the type of solar system that could be placed, so whether that's a roof array or ground array. Next slide. If you can back one slide, maybe. There you go. So this is just an example of a sample full assessment report that Donna's working on, and that we will share with you. Oh, thanks, Jeff. Yep. No worries. We'll be sure to share the recording with you. Thank you for attending. So the top table, as Donna mentioned, so this assessment report will show the solar system sizes. So here at the the top row here, 40 kilowatt, 50, 60, as well as with the potential for that solar production and what that translates to for each solar size in terms of savings. And similarly, the bottom table here looks at solar production potential from an annual perspective on a monthly basis in terms of amount of solar that received, as well as the value of that solar and what that could mean for your electricity savings and your building. Next slide. All right, so collecting quotes. So the smaller text box, I'm sure you're all familiar with, that we've shared with you the list of solar installers for MACOG that Leah puts together. We also have a contractor registry that's on the EASSI website, and we'll continue to add to that. But some of the things you might be looking into in terms of these quotes, so it really depends. But I think some of the main things, of course, is like the total cost, the upfront costs, the break-even point. How long does it take for you to recoup on your investment? And then, the dollars per watt, which is kind of like a metric in terms of like the cost of your system and what the wattage is that solar system would produce. The percent offset would be, how much does this solar system potentially offset for your energy usage? So is that like, 5% of your energy, 10%, 50%, et cetera. Dan has mentioned, talked about the warranty. So I'm looking into those warranty considerations. The NAPCEP certification. So that's the certification based on installers that have that certification. They're specifically have that specialization in installing and working with solar panels. And you might also value things like, made in America or produced by unions or installed by unions. Pat has also mentioned returning citizens, so like that social component of it. So that might be something that you value in terms of installing a solar system. The aesthetics of it. So maybe you prefer a certain configuration of your solar on your roof or on your property, or the look and feel of it, so that it just meshes well with the design of your building. Whether you want it, less discreet, low profile, those types of considerations as well. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for attending. As well, there's the environmental education component of it. So you might want to look into whether you want something that's community facing, such as a dashboard or a kiosk that provides some, community facing education around your solar installation, how much it produces. Maybe that's something at your entrance or in a certain part of your building to just create awareness and kind of promote, some of the things you're doing for your organization and for the community. And a lot of times these are paired with a virtual dashboard. So, you could connect that to your website or an app, and it, provides that ability for awareness and education as well. Next slide. So the next couple slides are just some quotes, just to give you a sense of what they look like. And just for some background, so these quotes are for a large solar array for a school. So the cost of the system is may not be the cost that you will be seeing in your quote. So just so you're aware of that. So I just want to call out a couple things here. So this is solar energy system. So if you signed up for the solar co-op through Solar United Neighbors, solar energy systems would be providing those quotes to you. And so this just kind of gives you a sense of like what those quotes look like. So the called out here, the total system costs, the break-even point, which in a lot of cases in quotes is like the payback period. That's how they tend to define it. So in that particular graph of the solar payback period, you'll see here on the 8th years where the break-even point is. So years 0 through 7 is where you take on the debt of investing in that system, and as that solar system produces energy and you start to recoup on those savings, and then after that, starting in that 8th year, you're basically making a profit, saving on your your energy and making that that investment is basically paying itself off even more. Next slide. And this is just that metric that I mentioned, the dollars per watt. So looking at the total system cost and the solar system size, and what that means. And so this kind of helps as you potentially compare different quotes. So like the dollars per wattage and like seeing sort of the cost effectiveness of that. And so in some cases those quotes they list it specifically, and sometimes they don't. And we'd be happy to assist you in those comparisons and putting that information together for you as well. Next slide. So this is an example of a quote from Wellspring. Here I just called out like the percent offset. So that's another thing that you might be interested in. So here 90%, 98% energy offset for their energy usage. And then again, like the break-even point, here they, the 11-year payback period. Next slide. And then this is something you might see. So there's a lot of things going on here. But basically, what I'd like to call out here is just like what they're trying to show here is the before and after. So what your energy usage is before solar and after solar, and then what your bills would look like before and after solar. So you can see sort of that difference. Next slide. And then this is just another thing that you might see similarly, like the payback period, the break-even point, and then the graphic associated with it. Next slide. Yeah, so like this is just like a comparison of those quotes. I just grabbed some of the sample criteria that I mentioned briefly. And so really, again, it really depends on like what you're interested in, what you value. So I just pulled some of that information together. And the NAPSEP certification, the system size, the warranty, do you prefer, is there a percent offset that you want more? Is that something you care about more? The cost per watt is, that cost effectiveness here. And then as well, the payback period. So, those are things that, as you get these quotes, you can start to compare and contrast them and then come to a decision about which one works best for you. Next slide. And of course, you'll select contractors, you'll decide on financing. Next slide. Right. Next. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, as you all know, the EASSI program provides a 50% matching grant. So if you spend at least $20,000, you'll receive the $10,000 from the city. And if you need additional financing, you can go through your preferred lender. We also know of some, low interest financing options. Of course, our partner through IFF and Collective Sun is another organization that we know of that provides low interest financing. And if you have any questions or interest in those financing options, feel free to reach out to me. Next slide. And then there's also the potential consideration of solar fundraising. So maybe you want to make this a talking point as part of your way to pay for the system. Making that talking point of how it aligns with your organization, and being a good community member, environmental steward. There's also that care for creation. Put in a couple links here for some funding opportunities, specifically for some of the organizations here that are Catholic churches or congregations, and these can also be used, I believe, not just for solar but for energy efficiency projects. And as well, there's that talking point of investing in future generations, making that upfront cost to invest in future generations. That would also, that makes sense financially as well in terms of reducing your energy usage and bills. Next slide, please. Any questions? I'll just stop right here on what we've discussed so far. All right, Leah, I see in the chat you put, if you're only doing a 10% offset, your export should be quite small, which means the EDG tariff wouldn't have much financial impact despite what methods end up being applied. Good news if you don't think you'll make the net metering timeline. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
Just that it really matters what size system you're installing relative to your annual usage. So if you're trying to do 100% offset, and then it's very, very, very important to try to get under the net metering timeline. And those who are looking at only 10%, it almost doesn't matter to meet that timeline. So that's pretty important to understand.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Couple announcements. So we will email you a copy of the presentation and a recording. We have a press release that has come out, and we've gotten some media coverage on that. We have a contract registry that's available, and it's on the EASSI website. And we're continuing to add to that registry. I've emailed some folks regarding setting up an energy assessment review meeting. And I should be reaching out to you either today or tomorrow regarding the date of that meeting for you. As well, we have the EASSI Spring Cohort Social on April 5th from 5 to 7. So feel free to attend that. It's a open agenda, so you can talk about EASSI, solar, anything you like. And that's all I have. Next slide. I think we could probably skip the next. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So any questions, feel free to contact us. There's my number and email. And if you have any questions for IFF, you can call or email them there. And I think that's all we have.